It is Wednesday, my dudes, and welcome back to Velocity Lake, the Planet Coaster series in which I make a theme park in the game Planet Coaster, and that theme park's name is Velocity Lake. Welcome back. And this is part 3 of 3 for the construction of the B&M sit-down coaster, which you can see here because it is the crux of this video. So if you've not seen, I guess if you've not seen any of the previous episodes of this series, I would recommend watching it from the beginning. But if you only care about this roller coaster specifically, because it is a good roller coaster. If you care about this coaster specifically and need to be caught up, then I recommend clicking the link to the full playlist in the description and watching it from episode 11. That was kind of the first of the 3 episodes in which we built this roller coaster. But let's cut the rambling and get straight to the point. We're going to be building a few things. It's kind of just the finishing off of the roller coaster and the surrounding area. So the first thing we need to do is sort out the queue line building, which it's fine, I guess, for all intents and purposes. And Planet Coaster, I often don't even bother doing interiors for buildings when you can't see the interior without having to really sort of get the camera inside the building, because I like looking at it like a model train set almost, where you just look at it all from a distance and it looks nice from a distance. But sometimes it is cool to know that there is that level of detail inside the building. So I went with a generic sort of greebling of the interior of this to make it look all nice and sci-fi, because the theme of this ride is like a lab, or like a scientific lab where the experiment goes wrong, and that's the ride. That's it. It ain't no, really cool backstory. That's it. It serves its purpose, I guess. I just wanted an excuse to try out the sci-fi scenery theming again, because I've never really done it before except in Crimson Tower, and I'm not really a fan of how Crimson Tower's sci-fi theme came out. Like, I think it had a lot of great potential. Like, the orb-shaped... I'm assuming pretty much no one on there remembers this at this point, but it had, like, these orb-shaped towers and all this. So it looked kind of... It had potential, but I think it didn't really meet my expectations in what I really wanted the sci-fi theming to be. Like, I think it was just a little bit too unrealistic, but... I don't know, you might disagree. But this is my attempt of a more kind of realistic sci-fi theming. Like industrial sci-fi. Like not, Star Wars, but like more in industry sci-fi. Like, scrap brain, that sort of thing. So that's the theming here. There's not much more to discuss, really. You can pretty much see me placing it all here, so I won't elaborate too much on the design process. But then, after we've built this, we can just finish off the building. But I guess there isn't much to finish off, but we need to round off the entrance to the queue building, which at the moment is fairly sort of stock. So we'll finish that a bit better, and then we can add the greenery, because that's one way of making parks look a little bit better. If your park looks a bit empty or a bit, void of character and life, generally you can fix that by just adding lots of greenery. I found that's a really easy way, and probably the best way, in fact, of making parks look better. It's just to keep spamming greenery until it looks good. I guess it is scenery, but it's green scenery. Anyway, that's the main bit. So this coaster is pretty much done, right? We've got the station building done. We've got the track layout done. There's just a few bits that still need to be addressed, such as the track supports are not great. I thought it'd be cool to have these lights at the end of the tunnel as well, so we can just go ahead and do that. Although in retrospect, these lights look fine, but they've got those sort of jutty out bits, which I think might come a little bit too close for comfort to the rider's hands. So I may end up... It might not be very safe. I don't know. We'll have to just... I'll have to probably pause it and just check if that's what I often do when I'm constructing custom scenery, or kind of custom supports, I should say, or scenery that comes very close in contact with the track. I generally do a test run and then pause the game when the car comes close to the object in question, and I kind of gauge how far someone's arms could potentially stretch out. So you can see I tried a few different types of roof for this building. I still wasn't quite sure. I didn't want to leave it with just a flat rooftop, but I wasn't quite sure as to what the roof should be. So we will go back and finish that later on. For the time being, I thought I'd add these sort of access ports to the dips here, just in case the ride valleys itself. Valley, for those that don't know, is when a roller coaster goes downhill and then starts going up the next hill, but then doesn't quite get to the top of it and then falls back down again. A really famous example of this would be the Smiler crash. A test car valleyed in the back wing segment, and then the next car came along and smashed into the back of it, and I'm sure you know the rest of this story. That's the example of being valleyed. So if in the case of this ride, if a car were to valley, riders can dismount the car and get back to surface level through those access doors. There's like you can pretend there's underground paths that connect them. I'm not going to go, I know I said I was going to try and be a little bit more precise and thoughtful when it came to the detailing, but I think I'm happy to just use my imagination that there are corridors going underneath those land masses there. The Planet Coaster Path tool, it breaks one's spirit if you try too many ambitious things. So here I thought it'd be cool to add a bit more kind of substantial structure to the mid-course break run here. So the first thing I'm going to do is extend the catwalk out a little bit to make it a bit more, substantial. And then we can kind of create a custom staircase to hypothetically get to and from the bottom. But yeah, I guess you could just sort of see me doing here, so I don't have to talk too much about the construction of the staircase and, catwalk. But I was saying about valued coasters just then. Really recently, or at least recently for me, for you guys, this is about, quite in the past now, because it's currently June. I mentioned this exact thing last episode. I recorded all 3 of these B&M hypercoasters back to back to back, just so that I can remember what I talked about in a previous episode, and so I can, keep the commentary fresh and thing. Like if I did them, if I did them over the course of 3 weeks, I might forget what I talked about in the previous episode and then just, end up repeating myself. So I'm doing all of these 3 back to back. So it's currently, for me, the 22nd of June. And this coaster was built probably February, March time. And for you guys, it's probably even later in the year than that. So it's not, what I'm trying to say is that this is not a topical news story now. But it did just happen recently to me. And that is the coaster Gatekeeper at Cedar Point. For those that aren't quite sure which one that is, that's the wing coaster. And it's famous because it kind of goes over the entrance arch to the theme park, hence Gatekeeper. That valleyed recently. And the way that they recover valleyed coasters is you'd think they could just sort of tow it around the track, but often that's so difficult because you have to basically pull it over a loop, let it valley again, stop completely, then winch all over the next hill, and it takes ages. What they often do is they just dismantle the entire car and then rebuild it back onto the transfer track, and that's how they recover it. In theory, a coaster should very, very rarely valley, hence why I found out about the one at Cedar Point valleying, because it is such a fairly rare occurrence. It tends to happen in high winds. This is not the same as rollbacks, which are common by comparison. Rollbacks occurring on coasters such as Top Thrill, Dragster, King Dakar, Stealth. You know the ones I mean, right? The ones that are launched coasters that basically consist of a giant top hat, like a big vertical. It launches, goes up a big steep vertical lift hill, and then arcs over, straight vertical down, then it finishes. That kind of layout. Those roll back a lot, so the launch doesn't quite get the car over the hill. But it's not a big issue because it will just roll back naturally to the station, so there's no kind of need for recovery or rescue. That's rollback. It's not quite the same as valleying, although I guess it is similar in principle. I don't know why I felt the need to go over that. It's just I'm just dragging this out because we're now 8 minutes in, and this is I thought last episode was the longest portion of this trilogy, but I guess it isn't. I think this one might be slightly longer. I guess because although most of the roller coaster is done, we do need to work on the surrounding area, which I guess eats up more time than I seem to remember it taking. So yeah, I think this is a fairly realistic custom support here. Maybe it's a little bit overbuilt, that catwalk, but at the same time I quite like the fact that it's overbuilt because it means that there's more head chopper moments. Head choppers are just the term given to when one's head seems to get very close to scenery, even though it is far too far away for even your arms to hit the scenery if you stretch them right out. But when you're going at those sorts of speeds, it's quite hard to gauge distance sometimes. There's some good head choppers, so having the overbuiltness actually I think adds to the thrill of the ride. And then of course, like I said earlier in the last episode at least, we need to consider the fencing off of the ride. So I decided to go for the temple pieces as the curb, and then just added some fences to the top, and that's going to form the barrier. I will drop the whole thing down a little bit, so it's not just a solid wall. Like guests can look in and get some good off-ride photo opportunities, but it's easier just to build like this because I can just plop them down without having to worry about the advanced move tool and spend many more hours longer than necessary building this. So I tend to just place the whole thing down higher than normal, and then just quickly select the entire thing and just drag it down in one fell swoop rather than doing it for individual pieces. If this doesn't make sense, either you don't play Planet Coaster or I'm just not very good at words, which is an equally likely conclusion one we might have to consider. But I'm doing it now. You can see me selecting all the pieces, drag them down, so we've got a nice curb clearance still, but guests can still very easily look over it and through the fence. And it's easy enough that it's going to be quite difficult to work your way into the ride. Obviously, with all these inversions, there's a good chance that you may lose your phone. And I mentioned this in the last episode. This is why it's good that I'm doing these commentaries back to back so I can address what I've already discussed, is that sometimes guests, for some reason, will risk their lives to save a piece of plastic that fell out of their pocket. An expensive piece of plastic, I do concede. But is it really worth risking getting yourself decapitated to rescue your phone, which are things that happen when you could just wait till the park closes and the ride stops and the operators will just get it for you? I mean, phones are waterproof in this day and age, right? So it's not like there's much risk to the phone. I imagine the impact of it falling out of your pocket and hitting the ground runs more risk. So I don't really understand the people that, break into a coaster's limits just to retrieve things they lost, especially things like hats. Why? So I guess it is natural selection at work, but we still don't want people to do it if we can help it. It's not a great publicity look, if someone gets decapitated or otherwise have injuries not compatible with life, so we want to avoid it if we can. So having a good substantial fence is a good way to ensure that won't happen. Not that it's even something we need to worry about in Planet Coaster, because guests here aren't dumb like they are in real life, and they won't do that, but again, go for the little model. So I went with these fins. You can see me here. Wow, Matt's talking about what's on screen. Isn't that a first? I'm using these fins to create a nice... I guess they look almost like a big heat sink, don't they? Just to add a bit of kind of structure to the roof that isn't just boring flat roof, but not so overbuilt that it just looks a bit cartoonishly out of place. I think this looks like a nice compromise for the architectural style of the building. And then, of course, get some sort of nice entrance. One of the nice things about working with the sci-fi pieces is that there's lots of really big, chunky, prefabricated parts that you can place down and fill up space really quickly, but they look pretty good as far as prefab stuff goes. And then for the curving of this area, I thought I'd make the most of you being able to use the sci-fi theme and adding these. I don't know what this is meant to be, maybe like awning or I guess just building greeble. And I actually really like how this pathway came out here. I wasn't quite sure at the time because we've got that little peninsula of land now. You can't really see it, but to the right of this coaster, from like our perspective we're at the moment, there's this little island of land, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. So I added that path there as a placeholder just so I knew there was still some land there to go, but I wasn't quite sure if I was going to do anything with it. In the end, I did actually build a ride there, and it has quickly become my favourite coaster I've ever built in this game. So I really hope you're looking forward to that, because I certainly am looking forward to showing you guys. Built entirely using the 4-meter smoothing technique. So a very, very long-winded process, but I was very happy with the results. So you've got that to look forward to in future episodes. Right now, we're going to be focusing on the more boring stuff, which is just the curbing. Again, placing it like a wall and then just dropping the entire structure down in one go with the advanced move tool. Much easier than doing it any other way, really. I guess I was just checking those lights jutting out and just checking all the other things for near misses. Like I said, don't worry. As I mentioned in the previous 2 episodes of this trilogy within the series, we will be showing a POV at the very end of this video using with the sound on and everything. I'm spoiling you guys really, so I hope you look forward to that. I love how this commentary is made a lot of just, I hope you're looking forward to this, I hope you're looking forward to that, because what's on screen is just boring, I accept. One thing that we're missing from the POV actually is that you can't see it, but you may remember some of this track goes over a body of water. At the moment, the supports for the ride just go into the water, and that's it, whereas it would be more realistic to have them sitting on concrete plinths that protrude above the waterline. We do that, but then I forgot to record a POV after I implemented those structures, so the POV itself will be missing those. For any eagle-eyed among you that may pick up on that, worry not, but I am aware that the POV will be missing those small, otherwise completely unmissable pieces of scenery. So then, just a case of filling out all the empty spaces of grass with bushes, really. Makes the park look a lot more realistic. Very, very seldom will you see just, big empty patches of grass in a theme park with no shrubbery whatsoever, even just wild shrubbery, like unplanned. It makes the park look so much more realistic with very, very little effort expended. And, it really helps hide the rough edges of the concrete meeting the land, meeting the curbing for these parts here where the ride dips below ground level. I am actually really happy with how the ride came out, with how it dives underground like that. Well, not underground, it doesn't go under a cover or anything, but how it dips below the path levels. You can get some really good looks at the car itself as it plunges in and out of the ground. I think it was a thing I didn't think too much about at the time, but I'm now so glad I followed through with that idea, because I'm very happy with it. And also that little dip that goes over the pathway just there after that vertical loop, you're going to get so much airtime out of that. Your stomach's going to go flying through the top of your skull. It might not be safe, but hopefully it is. But there's going to be great just standing underneath that bridge as the car just rockets over you. Here, I decided to build a thrill ride and couldn't find one that had a good enough footprint. You can see a lot of them will fit, but there's not enough room to add an entrance queue or exit queue. So I went with this one in the end. Now, you may notice that when you place flat rides in Planet Coaster, it actually flattens the ground around it, but like excessively. So more ground than what needs to be extended out gets, flattened out. So as you can see, hopefully, you can see the concrete pit that the roller coaster dives into. There's now terrain clipping over through the edge of that concrete because this ride does that to the terrain, and you can't use the terrain tool to get rid of that. So I will have to knock down this ride in pieces and just move it a little bit to get rid of that terrain that's now shifted over into the pit. But I'm just letting you know now that I am aware that that's happened in case you saw that and were possibly, a little bit frightened, a little bit scared. Worry not, my children, I'm here for you. And we will be addressing that soon. I mean, it's a shame because what we got now is a pretty perfect layout for the path and everything. It was really good because I'll have to shift the throw ride a little bit closer to the lake side, not the roller coaster side. We'll end up losing some of the path space and it's not ultimately quite as good. But I guess it's one of the niggles that Planet Coaster has. It doesn't tackle paths and terrain particularly well. It's an otherwise, it's a near perfect game. But some things like the path tool is trash. The terrain tool isn't great. Well, the way rides will reshape the terrain is not great at times, and roller coasters are very hard to get perfectly smooth. Aside from those, they sound pretty major, admittedly, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not too bad. This game's it's a pretty good game, guys. You should get it. I recommend it. I play it a lot. That being said, I am excited for Planet Coaster 2, which I'm sure everyone seems to have accepted that Frontier is going to make a Planet Coaster 2. Now I'm in the circle of creators, and I asked the person that I don't know, I did sign an NDA and I can't remember what was in it, so hopefully I'm not breaching that right now. I did ask her if there's going to be any more plans for Planet Coaster DLC or sequels, and she didn't comment on that. So I have no idea if people have heard any different to this. But hopefully they make a Planet Coaster 2. I mean, they did work on Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and, that had a sequel. Not a very good sequel, but it had a sequel nonetheless, and Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 in and of itself was a sequel. So hopefully they appreciate the benefits of having sequels for these sorts of games. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's difficult to justify a sequel in a sense because it's not going to be any different than what we have now. It's just going to be better graphics, better performance, slightly different ride types, probably a different UI, but it's things like, I'd be happy with Planet Coaster if it was just, big expansion packs like we had in the olden days. So they just add a water park expansion pack for like 20 quid and it just basically adds like almost an entire second game over the top of it. I don't know. I have many thoughts for Planet Coaster 2. I'm sure lots of other YouTubers who are way better at this game than me have much better suggestions for what could be in a sequel. For me, I'm just happy building roller coasters. I have a person of simple tastes. Let me just enjoy myself. So here we go. I noticed the terrain, so I had to quickly shift the ride over to the side. Oh, we actually deleted. I didn't realize we deleted everything. Maybe I should have cut some of that footage out. Whatever. So just basically shifting it in very small increments to get that terrain to shift back through the concrete so it doesn't look stupid again. But you can see that didn't really leave me much space for a queue line. So hopefully this ride doesn't end up being too popular because we haven't got much queue space to accommodate. I guess most people will just see a queue like that, and if it's too long, they won't join it, and that'll be the end of that. So maybe the problem will manage itself. I don't know. I am also limiting the guest number in this park to 1,000. I haven't opened it yet, but when I open it, the park scenario settings are set to limit guests to 1,000. Not for really any reason other than just to conserve frame rate. Unfortunately, frame rates in this game plummet when guests are in the park, so I tend to limit my park to 1,000 guests. So I come up with this backstory in my head that we're like a very exclusive park, so our tickets are very expensive because we limit the number of people who can come in, so no one has to face big long queues or overcrowding, anything like that. It's a boutique experience. We are Lowne Aerospace. We make all of our money through private space contracts. If we have the budget to build a hotel and casino on Minmus, which is definitely a moon in the universe of Planet Coaster, then we probably have the budget to manage a theme park at a loss. And there is... Let's just zoom out on the timeline. How much time we've got left? We've still got a little bit of time left, but most of Most of the B&M sit down is done obviously in the surrounding area. There's a little bit more things we can do. So theming for this ride specifically, the name of this ride is Insanity, and the flat rides in this game, I think pretty much all. I think there's like a couple that don't, but most of the flat rides in this game have their own little cool custom signs, which is very nice. Match the color scheme to the ride as well, the roller coaster as well. Finish off those planters as well. Those planters are just there to mask all the holes in the plaza because it is, it's very difficult to make perfect plazas in Planet Coaster unless you're going for perfectly square ones. And then we could just, fill in the gaps. Like I said earlier, shrubbery and plants are the best way of just making parks a little bit more natural. So that's what I gone do here. And then there is some space under the dive loop for the B&M coaster as well. I should probably call it the B&M sit-down coaster. I think it's called Daredevil at the moment, or Red Devil. Yeah, because I'll still go for that cutesy idea of naming all the roller coasters after their colour. So it's Red Devil. Under Red Devil's first dive loop, after the initial underground bridge bit, there's some space that I think ought to be filled in. So I'm gonna fill it. Okay, well, I thought I was going to do that now, but I guess I'm just generally looking at the park. Come on, Paths Matt, get to the point. Come on. There we go. So I was going to put a ride here, and I was deciding on what ride would best fill in this area. As you can tell, can't go for a very big footprint, especially after I learned that too big a ride will start making the terrain kind of clip through the concrete walls of the underground section of the roller coaster track. So although it seems like I could fit a bigger ride here, in terms of the actual real estate we have, we do have to take into account that we have to go for a slightly smaller footprint than what you could expect could fit here because of the fact that there will be a surrounding area of terrain that gets extended out if it's not all level. Now, in terms of the fencing around this one, it's a very small little Ferris wheelie. I think it's called Around the World in the game. Ferris wheel type temporary looking structure. So could go for the standard fencing we've been using for the other flat rides in this area, and of course the roller coaster itself. And then we'll end up, doing some fencing around this whole general area. Oh, yeah, I'm losing steam. I literally recorded this whole commentary, and then I went back and watched the footage again and noticed there was loads of footage missing, including the construction of this ride here and the surrounding area, all the shrubbery and fencing around it. And I was like, I don't remember mentioning that in my commentary, which is not uncommon for me to just not mention anything that's going on screen, but have I missed anything out? So I rewound it a bit and found that the footage was just missing, and what had happened was I used Shadowplay, what is called NVIDIA Share now, but that name sucks, so everyone still calls it Shadowplay. And Shadowplay, what it does, when you press record when you're playing a game, it will so say in Planet Coaster, you press record, it will then create a little folder called Planet Coaster and save all the Planet Coaster footage to the Planet Coaster folder. When I'm playing Kerbal Space Program and I press record, it will create a folder that says Kerbal Space Program and save all the footage of Kerbal Space Program to that folder. If you're not running a game, it will just create a folder called Desktop and record all footage to the Desktop folder. And sometimes, not very often luckily, but sometimes when you're playing a game, it won't sometimes register the name of the game and just save the footage to the Desktop folder. And that's what happened here. So I just imported all the footage from the Planet Coaster folder and just stuck it in the timeline in sequential order and then split it all into episodes that I thought made sense. And in this case, I'd done that, but some of this episode was made from desktop footage. So what you're watching now is actually footage captured from the Desktop folder, not the Planet Coaster folder. So I had to quickly scrub half my commentary and some of this video and then insert this footage in. So yeah, now I'm just losing the will to live. And I think, did I even mention earlier on this video is only going to be 24 minutes long, and now it's half an hour because of the fact that I'd completely got to take into account that I'm adding all these other rides. In fact, I could have even split this into 2 episodes again, because half an hour is probably about as long as I'm really happy leaving these videos. I don't really want them to be any longer than half an hour. I think the only video I've ever done that was longer than that was the construction of the Neptune Park Tower, because that was such a demanding structure, and it's not single buildings. I don't really want to split into multiple episodes unless it's something massive. I guess the Neptune Park Tower. But I'm thinking more roller coasters would be the things I'd be happy to split into multiple episodes, because that's a far more substantial structure. You got your track, you got your internal kind of infrastructure, like your transfer track station, that sort of thing, queue line, surrounding area, shops, buildings, etc. Much bigger projects than single buildings. So single buildings that take a long time, I'm much happier in leaving as just very, very long episodes. But so that's why the Neptune Part 1, but everything else I'd rather just split into multiple parts. But I did say, if you wanted to watch all 3 parts of this in one go, you can do that. If you really want to subject yourself to this horrendous... I appreciate that these Planet Coaster videos are very rambly, because I don't really have there's only so much you can really talk about. Like Kerbal Space Program, I know people say that my KSP conversation can be quite rambly as well. But in that, there's always things going on. So you got your first of all, you got your build, so you can talk about kind of the design of the craft. Then you got your ascent, so you got about the ascent. Then you got to stabilize your orbit. Then you got to plot your maneuver. Then you got to get. There's always something going on. In this game, I'll spend 2 hours placing trees, and it's like at a certain point, I feel like there's not much more I can really talk about when it comes to placing trees and fences. So sorry about that. Speaking of recurring and tedious topics in this park, here we get to the curbing again. That's right. What would this series be if it didn't have curbing in every single episode? So using the temple pieces to form the curves for this part of the park, just to differentiate it a bit from the architectural style of the main island or the central island. I always call it the main island, even though I guess it's not really the main part because all the big exciting rides are on this peripheral land here, but I guess the hub island would probably be better. And now he's doing some curbing here, going for a slightly different one because this would be a potential place for people to go and have their picnics, sit on the beach a little bit. So we want some slightly lower curbing just so they can more easily step over it. I will put some life rings on the side of the building just in case little Johnny wanders off and attempts to drown himself like a lot of toddlers seem to try and do. And so we'll do that. But that's not the time right now. We still need... I haven't opened the park, so it doesn't matter. Oh, don't worry, guys. We're nearly there. Just a few more necessary infrastructure things to do. So I thought I'd use some custom lampposts. Custom lampposts in very loose air quotes, because as far as custom lampposts go, they're probably the least ambitious ones you could possibly make. Just kind of the 3 lamps on that, they look as about as stock as you can get. So not particularly themed because they're not really meant to, detract from the theming of the rest of the park. So just going to place them along here. And that's the lampposts. There's not much to talk about with lampposts, honestly. I just set the lighting to be late at night to make things dark, as well, funnily enough. And then we just place them, make sure everything's nicely illuminated. Because when I open this park eventually, the opening times will extend into kind of the darker hours. We do want to make sure that people can navigate the park nice and safely. I don't then spend too much effort in terms of lighting up the roller coasters themselves using spotlights, because I feel like spotlights in this game don't really have much of a range. Like, I always feel like they don't light things up particularly well unless they're literally right up next close to the track, unless you use the gigantic spotlights, but I find those quite hard to integrate nicely into scenery. So I basically don't have the willpower or energy or motivation to do it. Is what that boils down to, really. And here, I had that kind of like green goo pit, so I thought, what would be a good way of lighting up this path? So I thought I'd go with this is like an excavation site or something. So we got these temporary lights from the Studios pack, I believe. They've gone now. I thought they were going to be on screen longer so I could talk about them. But yeah, just go for the very temporary kind of pop-up scientific field laboratory look for that green goo pit. So we've got those temporary lights there. The backstory, I guess, could be that green goo pit was there, so they built the containment box around it, added those lights, then built the laboratory right next to it on site so they could do research there. And then there was an extension, and this big red alien grew out of containment, and then you ride along the body of the alien, and then that's the track. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. That was basically the plot of Nemesis, wasn't it? So yeah, just doing some backstage pathing to this ride here by basically placing a path in the backstage area. Another great commentary. Thank you for watching this, guys. Don't worry, we are very, very... I can see the timeline is very quickly getting to the end. So there's not much I really need to talk about now, although it's fading very slowly. Why did I edit it like this? I edited this, say that 3 times fast, a while ago, and I'm trying to work out why I felt the need to have this big, slow transition, and I guess there was no need because it was very, it's just basically placing concrete footers. But now I spent so long talking about the fading and discussing the nuances of my editing, I feel like I should leave it in because I've got things to do. I want to do things today, guys. I want to get this commentary done, honestly. I don't care about you guys very much, as you all know. So let's just leave the commentary like that. So that's the concrete footers. I did mention actually earlier that these would not be in the final POV. So just a heads up, guys. These will not be in the POV. So I do apologize profusely for their omission. But I think if you can use your imagination. I feel like people wouldn't even notice this if I didn't mention it. But just in case someone does, I'm just putting it out there right now that these won't be in the final POV. But you can just use your imagination, I'm sure, and you can visualize what they might look like. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed this B&M sit down. I've never built a B&M sit down in this park in this game before, actually, because this ride type was only recently added to the game. I think it was only like for me, it was only recently added. It's been a much longer period of time as elapsed probably for you guys when you finally get around to watching this. But it's only fairly recently as far as the ride types go, so I haven't had much opportunity to play around with it before. But this is it here, so I do hope you enjoy it. I'll come back after the POV and catch you then. And there we have it, back at the station. So I do hope you enjoyed this POV, like I said, and I hope you could tolerate this commentary as well. There's a lovely little shot of what we've managed to build in these past 3 episodes. Going to be another roller coaster, I believe, in the next episode, or very soon. So I hope you look forward to that. On screen, there are links. On the left-hand side is a link to the full playlist, and the one on the right was chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm. There's also a link to subscribe and to check out the Patrons if you want to. And in the description, there's a link to Discord, Twitter, merchandise, Instagram, all that good stuff. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.